Okay, it is currently 8:30, so I am going to call the meeting to order, the March 12th, 2021, 1 year later meeting of the SDCERS Board of Administration. And I'd like to ask Ms. Joyner to call the roll at this time.
Carol Broad. Present. Karina Coleman.
Present.
Charles Hallquist.
Present.
Paul Kaufman.
Here.
Lou Maggi.
Present.
Michael McBride.
Present.
V.APPROVAL.
I'm no gift, but I'm present.
Roberta Spoon.
Here.
Thank you, Steve.
Tom Battaglia.
Tom's here.
George Kinney.
I'm here.
Jeffrey Wallace.
Present.
Okay, everyone is here. No one is. Oh, Clifford Shearson. Cliff Shearson. Okay, everyone's here except Cliff, but he's expected to be here.
Okay, so we have a quorum.
Yes.
Very good, thank you. And just a reminder, today when we have votes, if you'd like to make a motion or a second, please say your name first so that Cynthia can get an idea of who's participating. Okay. And with that, I'd like to ask if there's any public comment.
No public comment.
Okay, thanks. At this time, Greg has asked to have the floor to make some comments.
All right. Hey, today is a very special day where we are honoring departing board members for their dedicated service to SDCERS. And although these community volunteers are serving without compensation, they are well rewarded with the understanding that they make a measurable positive difference in our members' lives in fulfilling our mission to deliver timely and accurate benefits and ensuring the trust fund's safety, integrity, and growth. They have brought our members closer to achieving retirement security, which is a very noble thing to do. Following our departing board members, listed in alphabetical order by last name. First up to be recognized and honored is Tom Battaglia. He was elected by the general members in 2017. Tom served on the Disability Committee, the Business and Governance Committee, and the Investment Committee. And Tom will be well remembered for being a fiduciary who wore many hats, wore them well, and ensured the voice of our members were part of our deliberations. Former SDCERS CEO Mark Hovey offered these remarks. I remember Tom losing his glasses for a short period of time, which made reading very difficult for him. Fortunately, that didn't happen over an SDCERS board meeting date, so Tom was usually well prepared for our pension discussions. By the way, Tom, remind me, how do I pronounce your last name again? Next up, Carol Broad. Appointed May 2015, Carol served on our Business and Governance Committee, served as our Investment Committee Chair, our Board Vice President, and is our current Board President. We have been fortunate to have her strong executive skills to lean upon during our pandemic and these tough operational times and all that it has brought us. Mr. Hovey offered, I was so pleased to have Carol join the board. She often asked me tough questions that I had not previously thought of, but she did it in a non-confrontational way that was so respectful of me and staff. I loved her leadership style. Thank you, Carol. Next up, Chief Mike McBride. Elected by the fire safety members in April 2017, Chief McBride served on our Disability Committee and used his words sparingly yet strongly. I appreciated his integrity in helping the board to operate with transparency. Mr. Hovey offered, Mike and I had little overlap time, but I recall he was most gracious in agreeing to serve despite having an impossibly busy work schedule and personal schedule. Always asked good questions and had a dedicated heart for service. Thank you, Chief McBride. Next up, V.APPROVAL. Appointed in June 2013, served on our Disability Committee, and as our Business and Governance Committee Chair. Renowned for his desire for efficient proceedings, he regularly peppered his comments with wit while having a talent for bringing clarity to issues during our board deliberations. Mr. Hobie offered, my first impression of Tanasi came from reading his resume, which at the top of the page one said, the man, the myth, the legend. While direct in his questioning of staff, and sometimes his questioning of disability applicants, he most definitely improved the governance of SDCERS. I learned a lot from him. Thank you, Tanasi. And last but certainly not least, we're honoring today Jeffrey Wallace. Elected by the general members in January 2013, Jeff served on the Disability Committee and the Investment Committee, quiet and reflective in the boardroom. He was never bashful to follow up on issues when he needed additional information and clarification. Mr. Hobie offered, Jeff was great at asking questions other board members may have been too embarrassed to bring up. He made us better by having staff explain our positions in a clear, unambiguous language. Plus, Jeff always knew the best places in town to have lunch. Thank you, Jeff.
My greatest honor.
On behalf of all the staff, we would like to thank you for your service. We know change is inevitable, but however, we already miss you. We'd also like to recognize Bobby Spoon and George Kenny for completing their first four-year term. And we are expecting, hoping, pleading for their service to continue in their upcoming second term. We'll talk more about the future later in our meeting. Thank you, and this concludes my comments.
Well, thanks so much, Greg. I'm sure I speak for all the departing board members. We appreciate your kind thoughts, and hearing from Mark is really lovely as well. So thanks very much, and we'll all miss this experience very much, I'm sure. I will. Okay, I'm going to move on then to the consent agenda items. So can someone speak up with a motion?
So move, Tanasi.
Second?
Karina, second.
All seconds.
We're ready to vote. Ms. Broad?
Yes.
Ms. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. Battaglia?
Yes.
Mr. Hallquist?
Aye.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mr. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Maggi?
Yes.
Ms. McBride?
Aye.
Mr. Provolos?
Aye.
Ms. Spoon?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Aye.
And I'm going to just see if Mr. Shearson?
Yes.
Okay, all votes are in and the motion passes 12-0.
Thank you. Next, we're going to move on to business operations. We're going to hear from Jean and Alice with Chiron. As you'll recall, in January, we looked at sort of a draft, I guess you'd call it, really the final of our June 30th, 2020 valuation. And as is customary, we review it in January, we approve it in March. And so we're going to hear some comments from Jean and Alice and then proceed to vote.
Thank you, Carol. So back in January, we presented a 53-page PowerPoint, which I think took at least an hour, and we had a number of questions. For this March meeting, you have the entire deck still, but we're really just going to jump to the key aspect. If you could turn the slide to the next page, I don't know who's controlling it there. Oh, that's not the... Okay. We're only going to cover the June 30, 2020 valuation and sources of change. If any board members want to go back over historical trends or we have comparisons to other systems in the country, we can do that. But right now, we're just going to look at the current results. The next slide. So if the board accepts these results, and by the way, nothing has changed from January, even though that was a draft report, absolutely nothing has changed. This would determine the city's contribution to be paid 3.5 months from now, July 1st, 2021. Next slide. This is a reminder of all the different systems we have, and I'll just note, because I know this will probably come up in a different topic later on, that gray area there in the upper right, that was the Prop B closure, which we're now working with staff and the city on some resolution there. I'm sure that'll be a topic of discussion later. One of the key drivers of this valuation result was the recent prior year's experience study. I'm going to let Alice summarize what happened during that experience study. And by the way, this is not new information. It's just a reminder of what we presented previously.
Great, thank you. So we can turn it to slide 4, please. So if you all recall that we performed an extensive experience study that we presented the results in July of 2020. And the main takeaway, the key assumption that was updated when we were focusing, we did an analysis of both the economic and demographic assumptions, and it was decided there was no recommended change to the economic assumptions. However, there was a wide range of changes to the demographic assumptions, and most notably was the mortality assumption. So the Society of Actuaries and the Retirement Plan Committee, they performed a study that began in 2015 and in 2019 issued a report of new mortality tables. So when we performed the experience study in 2020 for the city, the port, and the airport, we updated the mortality assumption to reflect the current information which aligned with those new mortality tables. So the plans are now using a mortality assumption reflecting the public plan mortality tables and future improvement of those mortality rates. And on the valuation basis, those future improvements are what's called fully generational improvements, which is the idea that mortality improves year over year as people age. So a 65-year-old today will have a different mortality assumption than a 65-year-old 20 years from now. So that's that concept of fully generational mortality improvement, that it's constantly improving as the birth years change. Now, when assumptions change, it not only affects the contributions for the plan sponsors, but it also affects the member contributions. For the city charter that has the substantial equal contribution requirement. And in summary, for general members, the contributions increased in aggregate by 1.4% of pay. For safety members, the safety police members specifically, 2.0% of pay. And for safety non-police, 1.6% of pay. On slide 5, we summarize the results or bring out the highlights of the results from the port and the airport on the experience study. The classic members for the port and the airport have fixed contribution rates by entry age for the classic, the original tier, but the new PEPRA tiers are also subject to change when assumptions change. So the assumptions, with the assumption change, the contribution rates will be changing effective July 1st, 2021. For port safety members, they will have an increase in aggregate of 1.2% of pay. The port miscellaneous PEPRA members, that change was minimal with fluctuation up and down for those members depending on where they fell in the demographic. And for airport, the aggregate increase was 0.5% of pay. So that's a high-level look at the impact from the experience study, just a recall of what happened, what was the major event that happened in terms of the valuation of the liabilities, so that now let's flip it all the way to the slide that begins with the city's valuation results.
Yes, and what she's skipping through all the historical, but you can keep on going to 20. We had covered these slides previously. There. So these are the summary of the key results for the city. Membership results are in the dark blue and the gray, assets and liabilities, and contributions in the gold. So we'll start with the membership information, and I think the key thing that's taken place here is that despite actives declining because of the closed plan at the time, declining by 3.9, The payroll still grew by 3.4, and that's because the average salaries increased by 7.5% as compared to our assumed increase in average salary of 3.05. So that's something that the experience study, I think, dealt with. Mm-hmm. That resulted in liabilities greater than expected, and our unfunded liability in the next section in the gray, due to the leverage of assets being less than expected and liabilities higher than expected, increased the unfunded by 10.9. And the funded ratio drops on a smooth value basis slightly by 1.4, and on a market value, it actually dropped by 5.1%. And all the above combined to increase the employer contributions by the bottom line, the total ADC, by 13.5%. On the next slide, or actually, yeah, the next slide, mm-hmm. is showing the sources of change, and you can see we expected the liability in that first column to grow by 239, but it actually grew much more because of the payroll increases that weren't anticipated and the assumption changes that Alice covered. And the assets were expected to earn 391, but on a smooth basis, but they earned 122 million less. And so the combination is what resulted in the hike in the unfunded liability and in the ADC. Again, these are the exact same numbers that were covered in January. Mm-hmm. Alice, if you want to cover the...
I'll go ahead, yes, and take us through the port and then the airport results. So in the membership summary for the Unified Port District, we see that average salary increased by 1.1% as opposed to the salary assumption with the underlying inflation assumption for salary at 3.05%. And we'll see how that translates to a gain, an experience gain in the next slide. In terms of the assets and liabilities, given the increase in the liability compared to the increase in assets, the funded ratio for the port decreased by 1.1%, and it sits at 74.5%. In terms of the ADC, the components of change, so the normal cost UAL payment and expected administrative expenses, increased the total ADC by 11.9% to 22.1 million. On the next slide, we see the similar components of change that the city experienced. I'll focus all the way to the right on the ADC column. There, the ADC was expected to increase slightly, but given the asset experience, so on a market value, the assets returned 0.24%. On an actuarial value, the assets returned 5.65%, and that 5.65%, the smooth assets return is below the 6.5% assumption, hence the increase in the ADC from that asset experience of 0.7. Liability experience for the port was a gain and largely driven by the fact that salaries did not increase as much as expected, and the demographic assumption changes increased the ADC similar to the city, given the experience study and the demographic assumption changes, increased the ADC by 1.8 million to the total of 22.1 million ADC for the coming July 1. On the airport side,
next slide.
Thank you, next slide. Airport side, again, in that membership group of statistics, we'll focus on that average salary remained flat. They did have incoming members and departing members, bump up in the increase in members in pay status, and left that average salary relatively flat. In terms of the actuarial liabilities and assets, we hone in on the market value funded ratio. That funded ratio, same as the port, went down by 1.1% to 89.6%. And that 89.6% for the airport is significantly higher than what we're seeing for the city and for the port, mainly due to the airport's internal funding policy of reaching those markers, 95% funded and 90% funded. They make additional contributions to hit that funded ratio target. And their ADC components of change led to an ADC of 6.6 million, which is an increase of 7.3% from the prior year. On the next slide, we see the components of change. Again, the asset experience led to an increase in the actuarially determined contributions. Liability experience decreased that by $56,000, and the demographic assumption changes increased that ADC by 448 for a total of $6.57 million in contribution for the coming July 1st for the airport. And with that,
well, there's one more slide I just want to conclude on. If you could just flip to slide 35. And this is the projection for the city. I'm assuming that you're having a strong investment year. Is Liza or Marcel, do you know what the return year to date is?
Slightly over 14%.
Okay, so that we've got another quarter to go. So that we could have a reduction in the liabilities and contributions. But again, I'm not going to sit here and say I expect the rest of the quarter to go well. But hopefully we'll have a good year ending June 30th. So with that, if you just show the next two slides so the other plan sponsors see their projections. That was the Unified Port District and then the Airport Authority. And that concludes our formal presentation. And what I also tell the departing board members, I thoroughly enjoyed working with all of you, and going to miss you. And Donasi, it's been like between you and your dad, it's almost like 13, 14 years of pre-ovalosis, and I'm not going to have it anymore.
We apologize for that, Gene. Gene, thank you very much. You are an absolute asset to the organization, and I don't think the people really understand how lucky we are that Chiron's here and that you and Allison do what you do on a daily basis. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well said, and very true. So thanks so much for all you do.
So,
and does anyone have questions about the presentation before we vote? Comments?
McBride has a couple questions.
Okay.
And forgive me for not having them in January. So in my understanding, the average lifespan predicted by the pension now is 85 years. Is that correct?
Yes.
Well,
okay.
There's different tables and different groups, but the average lifespan is more and more people are living to their 80s and 90s is what's happening.
Understood. So in doing some research and trying to educate myself, I looked in the CDC life expectancy, and they're saying that the general life expectancy now is more at 79 years. And so I understand the reason to, hedge your bets and try to have actuarial gains as opposed to consistent actuarial losses. But how are the untimely early deaths impacting, the overall future liability and so forth? And does it really merit that huge increase that we're looking at, $300 million practically, based on all that?
A good chunk of that was salaries too, so it was maybe more like 240. But the CDC data is looking at the people today life expectancy. Your current members into the future. Let me reject that. You're into the future. Will COVID had an impact on people today or this past year? But we're talking about people into the future. Is COVID going to have a permanent impact on people like all of you, as far as your life expectancy? And CDC is not reporting on that. They're reporting a life expectancy of the people that exist right now, that had died, the average.
Yeah, and to add to what Gene said about that report that's circulating from the CDC, they took the life expectancy from this year and projected as if that was going to occur year over year over year in that report. So a lot of the reports were saying that the life expectancy was shortened, but in fact, if you look at it as a 1 year let's say, 1 year blip in the projected mortality, it really doesn't have as significant as an impact as that study reported.
Okay,
But
I think
it's a good question.
my question is more slanted towards like in particular to firefighters. We're not making that 85 years, and the impacts of those actuarial gains to the system is that how does the difference between those early deaths and actuarial gains to the system compare to the potential of someone living to 90, and those numbers I see being very small in the report that you used. It was 1% or less than 1%.
Let me just say we don't pick an age and say life expectancy is 90 or 85 or 79. We have a probability of making it to each age, and we have different mortality tables for different groups, and we also examined your own experience. We didn't just pick it out of the air. We looked at what your experience was over the experience study period. And so, and we also didn't go as far as some of the society tables would have indicated we should go to. So we didn't take the full bite. I don't know if you want to add to that, Alice.
Yeah, and I will just add that with this experience study, we actually selected separate mortality tables for the general population versus the safety population, because as you say, the experience that is reflected by the safety members does show those shorter lifespans. And so it is reflected by a different mortality table.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Okay, any other comments, questions?
Alice, I had one more question on that. My understanding as well is that the tables that we use are specific to government employees, not to the general population, where the CDC data is the general population. Is that correct or no?
Yes, that's correct. Yes. So we're using the public plan, the public sector mortality experience tables as the underlying table, but then they're adjusted to your plan's experience. So the city, port, airport.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, hearing no further comments, it's time to vote. So please speak up with a motion.
This is Charles. I'll make the motion.
I'll second then.
And was that you?
Cliff? Okay.
Cliff?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we are ready
Charlie
to vote.
and Cliff.
Ms. Broad?
Yes.
Ms. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. Battaglia?
Yes.
Mr. Hallquist?
Aye.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mr. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Maji?
Yes.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mr. Provolos?
Yes.
Mr. Shearson?
Yes.
Ms. Boone?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
All votes are in, and the motion passes 12-0.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to Chiron, and I'll miss you guys.
Miss you too.
Okay.
So, Greg and Marcel, would you need us to hang on for any other topic?
I don't think so. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Jane.
Okay, next we're going to turn to the Disability Committee, and I'll turn that discussion over to Charlie.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. Yesterday's disability meeting only had one real action item, but it was a sad meeting because it turns out all my committee is stepping off and finishing their terms. So I really want to thank everybody again for doing such a great job. I considered last night resigning so that I wouldn't be a committee of one, but I'm sure that will get fixed in in the next couple of days. But our big action item yesterday is we had a excuse me, I'm using my other computer to read the name here. We had recommendation from the adjudicator to deny the industrial disability retirement of Fire Captain Wayne Cross. Captain Cross commented to the board, but in his situation, he did suffer an injury, but he was accommodated and served almost his entire drop period. He retired just shortly before he would have been required to retire with drop, and that's the main reason his application was denied. So if no one has any questions, I move to approve the hearing officer's recommendation.
We are ready to.
I'll second it.
Oh, we don't need.
It doesn't require a second.
We don't need a second, so let's vote.
Ms. Bride,
Yes.
Ms. Coleman,
Yes.
Mr. Patalia,
Yes.
Mr. Hallquist,
Aye.
Mr. Kaufman,
Yes.
Mr. Kenny,
Yes.
Mr. Maji,
Yes.
Mr. McBride,
Aye.
Mr. Provost,
Yes.
Mr. Shearson,
Yes.
Ms. Spoon,
Yes.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
All votes are in. The motion passes 12-0.
We had several information items, which are about changing some of the rules, but you'll hear more about that from Tanasi in BNG. But we really didn't have a lot of discussion on these items, and my review of them, I think they're all appropriate. So we'll turn those over to Tanasi for BNG for our next section. And the other thing is we did get a disability status report, and just to let you know, Sandra and company are processing applications quickly. We have no backlog, and I really do appreciate the fine work the staff is doing, because I know when I was an active member, the delay in processing the applications was always a thorn in everybody's side, and right now we're doing real well. So my thanks and congratulations to the staff. And that concludes my report, unless anybody wants to have some specific numbers from Sandra.
Okay. Thanks, Charlie. Appreciate it. And with that, we're going to turn to Tanasi's last super efficient B&G report with maybe a little comic relief. Who knows?
Probably not. Probably not. The good news is we had 6 action items. They all passed unanimously. Are we going to take them one at a time?
No, we can vote them all at the same time.
Fantastic. Does anybody have any questions about the action items? Hearing none, then let's move this for a vote.
I'll move this for a vote.
Okay.
Second.
All right.
George Kenny, second.
We are ready to vote. Ms. Bride,
Yes.
Ms. Coleman,
Yes.
Mr. Patalia,
Yes.
Mr. Hallquist,
Aye.
Mr. Kaufman,
Aye.
Mr. Kenny,
Yes.
Mr. Maji,
Yes.
Mr. McBride,
Aye.
Mr. Provost,
Yes.
Mr. Shearson,
Yes.
Ms. Spoon,
Yes.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
All votes are in, and the motion passes 12-0.
All right. There were 9 reports. As the committee has been well trained, they read the material. The materials were excellent, and as a result, there was no need for any questions. I tried really hard to get David Bond to give the financial report, but he declined. So in any event, it all worked out well. Are there any questions by committee members about any of the report items? Hearing none, I'll turn the meeting back over to you, Carol.
Okay, thanks. That was super efficient. Next, we're going to turn to Investment Committee, and I'll turn the floor over to Karina Coleman.
Yes, so we met yesterday and we had one action item, which was to approve a $30 million recommendation to KKR's Real Estate Partners America 3 Fund. And I will turn it over to Jamie Hamrick.
Great. Thank you, Karina. You have in front of you staff and consultants' recommendation for a $30 million commitment to the KKR Real Estate Americas 3 for SDCERS non-core real estate allocation. The fiscal year 2021 real estate annual investment plan called for a total of $60 million to be invested in non-core real estate this fiscal year. The board approved the first $30 million allocation to Waterton Residential Property Venture 14 at the January meeting. This is the remaining allocation for fiscal year 21. The KKR Real Estate Partners Americas 3 is a non-core closed-end real estate fund focusing on executing a diversified, opportunistic strategy that is largely focused on investments in the U.S. The fund has a two-pronged investment approach. First, the fund will target investments in property types that have growth potential, such as industrial, multifamily, and select office properties in innovation and growth markets. Secondly, they will target investments that will capitalize on the cyclical dislocation as a result of the current market environment. And some examples here could include hotels, senior housing, student housing, and sellers who have become distressed. The fund will focus on the top 15 most populous U.S. cities that have experienced job growth in technology, financial services, and other professional service sectors. There are two reasons for this recommendation. First, the opportunistic nature of the fund position it to take advantage of the current market environment. The fact that this fund does not have any pre-specified assets allows it complete flexibility to take advantage of distress and opportunities as they arise. Second, this is an attractive return profile. The fund is targeting a net IRR of 12 to 15% and is expected to generate alpha over the benchmark. There are a few considerations. The first is that the fund can use significant leverage, similar to other opportunistic funds. This risk is mitigated by the fact that KKR has a 70% leverage limit and has historically kept their leverage well below that, and usually below 60%. There is also execution risk associated with this strategy. While it is expected that distress will be present in the market, it is not a guarantee. This risk is mitigated by the fact that KKR has a strong track record and has broad organizational support that may allow them access to a larger deal pool. Finally, I'd like to touch upon fees. The standard fee for this fund is 150 basis points. Townsend was able to negotiate a 50 basis point discount for their clients. And in addition to that, KKR has offered SDCERS the chance to participate in their first close, and that would further reduce fees an additional 25 basis points. That would result in SDCERS having a total fee of 75 basis points. This concludes my formal comments. The committee yesterday voted to approve this investment 5-0, and I can answer any questions that you have at this time.
Can I just clarify one thing?
Yes.
Yesterday, Ishika, the consultant, said there was up to a 20% non-U.S. component, and I believe the presenter said there wasn't. And then I think you just said that it was primarily U.S. So is there an allowed? Okay.
Yeah, let me clarify that for you. So the guidelines allow them flexibility to invest 20% max outside of the U.S. And of that, 10% can be outside of North America and Western Europe. So it's the guidelines that are giving them that flexibility. That being said, the manager in what they're planning for the fund, they are focusing on the U.S.
Okay.
So it's the guidelines. I think that the guidelines are a carryover from a previous fund where they maybe had more flexibility and they wanted to go outside the U.S. to seek those opportunities. In this case, they believe the best opportunities are within the U.S.
Okay, thanks very much.
Sure.
So,
And just a reminder for everyone, we were underweight non-core, so this allocation will bring us closer to our target asset allocation. This manager is obviously very renowned and has a global platform in this space, And I would like to make a motion to approve the recommendation to invest $30 million in the KKR REPA Fund 3. There any further comments or a second? I guess we don't need a second, but we do need a vote.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we are ready to vote. Ms. Bride?
Yes.
Ms. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. Battaglia?
Yes.
Mr. Hallquist?
Aye.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mr. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Maggi?
Yes.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mr. Provost?
Yes.
Mr. Shearson?
Yes.
Ms. Spoon?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
All votes are in, and the motion passes 12-0.
Thank you.
All right. The other two items that we had were informational items. One was the risk reduction analysis update, and I will turn that over to Liza.
Thank you, Corinne. Today we're going to have just a brief update on the risk reduction analysis project, which you will recall is a fiscal 2021 action plan item. And the purpose of this analysis was essentially to evaluate under what sort of circumstances could we reduce risk in the portfolio. The first step in this process was a risk attribution study, which we actually presented last July, and that focused on different sources of risk in the portfolio. And not surprising, the key takeaway was that investment policy risk was the largest source of risk. And investment policy risk being the risk that comes from the asset allocation or mix of different asset classes. So Anne's going to present an update to additional steps that we've taken in this project and steps that we will be taking during the rest of this year. And one thing I did remind everyone, the analysis that has been done so far is based on the current status of the plan being closed. Obviously, fairly shortly, we should know if that status changes. And if it does, we will incorporate that new information into the analysis. And all of this will end with the updated asset liability study, which we will be presenting in January. And now I turn it over to Steve and Katie for some brief comments. Thank you.
Great. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Liza. If we could flip ahead to page 3, I'll speak mostly to this slide, but as Liza had mentioned, this is a focus on long-term investment strategy. And the goal here is just to provide you all with an update on what can be expected over the next 6 to 9 months as we complete this project and this analysis on the potential of reducing the risk of the investment plan. And so I'll reiterate, as needed, we will pivot based on the outcome of what happens with Proposition B, but the next few slides and my comments are related to the current status of the plan. And so as you all know, the maturing nature of the investment plan, with our projections of it reaching full funded status over the next 15 to 20 years, and the closed nature of the plan, all lead to the notion that down the road, it may be prudent to reduce the investment risk of the investment strategy. And so what we wanted to lay out to you all was the second half of the project plan that is shown here on this page, how we plan to approach this. And so we're talking about steps 5, 6, and 7. And so what we want to identify first is what would a reduced investment strategy look like, and in doing that, we'll look to have some conversations with the board on what are the objectives of what we could term as the end state or a more mature state of the investment plan. What are some of the priorities? And this conversation we're looking to have likely in the early parts of the summer. And that's when we'll kick off the next asset liability study. And some of those questions might center around, is the goal to maintain 100% funded status? Or is it to have stability in contributions and to prioritize and just have that conversation? And that'll lay the foundation of the asset liability study that will be wrapped up in 2022. From
from there, once we know what that end state looks like or that potentially reduced risk state looks like, we'll create a framework on how do we get from where we are today to point B, and that'll be the how. So how will we do that? Make sure that we have a plan and a structure. And then step 7 is how will we monitor that and how will we look at that? And that last step is primarily done through these asset liability studies. And these are the studies that you all undertake every 3 years. The last one we did was at the end of 2018, wrapped up in early 2019. And then we'll be kicking off the next study early summer. We expect to get results to you all in the early parts of fall and wrap it up in early 2022. And before I wrap up, just a general kind of pulse on where we think the plan is today. You all heard earlier that the plan is about 74% funded. You all do have a more growth-oriented portfolio given the underfunded status. Projections are that liabilities will be increasing over the next 20 or so years before leveling off with the current status of the plan. And so all of that indicates that growth is needed. The risk profile that you all have, which is that 78% to return seeking, 22% to risk reducing, that profile continues to be appropriate for you all. The other thing that we looked at that is important here is the liquidity profile of the fund. Currently, we measure about a third of the portfolio or so is invested in quasi or illiquid investments. And we stress the liquidity of the portfolio during these analyses as well. And the current status of the plan we think is prudent, and we're comfortable with that level given the long-term time horizon that you all still have in needing a growth-oriented portfolio and the ability to handle and take on some of that and try and reach for some of that illiquidity and risk premium that comes with those strong investments. And those investments have done very well in terms of providing growth for the portfolio. So the asset allocation that you all currently have remains appropriate today. And what we want to do is just get ahead of the next phase, if you will, of the investment strategy and of the plan as it does mature and lay out what that'll look like and make sure that we're all on the same page with you all. So more to come on this. I'd be happy to answer any questions, but we'll get into more of the meat of this over the next 6 to 9 months as we kick off the asset liability study and get the feedback. And of course, learn more about the outcome of the decision around Proposition C.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Katie. Are there any questions on this item? Otherwise, I think I will be turning it back to you, Katie, for a brief review of total performance.
Karina, I'm actually going to jump in on that one today.
Okay, very good, Anders.
Thanks, Karina. If we can get the total fund performance deck up. Perfect, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Hope you're doing well. Let's jump into the fourth quarter performance. And as you can see on this slide, the fund generated a return of 9.4% for the quarter, outperforming the benchmark by 0.3%, driven mostly by strong relative performance across public markets. Looking at the fiscal year to date, same story there. Returns have stayed very strong on an absolute basis as a result of the strong rebound in the equity markets. And yeah, if we look at more updated numbers for the fiscal year to date, as of the middle of this week, we're up about 15.5% based on internal calculations. And over the longer time periods, you can see solid returns exceeding the 6.5% actuarial rate of return targets. If we can move on to slide 11. We'll take a look at SDCERS' return compared to its peer group. This peer group consists of public pension plans above $1 billion. SDCERS ranked in the 64th percentile for the quarter when compared to this group. And the reason for this ranking is mainly due to the fact that our peers have higher allocations to equities, which was the best performing asset class of the quarter. So pretty much if you had the more equities you had during the quarter, the better ranking you would have had. Over the longer term, though, a more balanced portfolio tends to outperform, as you can see over the longer term periods, where SDCERS ranks in the top third for the last 5 and 10 years, and actually in the top percentile for the last 20 years. So if we can move on to slide 18. This slide shows the breakdown of SDCERS's excess return over the benchmark. So on the total fund level, we can see that selection effect drove outperformance, which is what we like to see. This means that as a whole, SDCERS's investment managers generated excess returns above their benchmarks. And if we can drill down a little bit into some of the asset classes, let's move to slide 16. Perfect, thank you. So looking at the asset classes here, we can see solid outperformance across most public market asset classes. Value stocks, as you may know, finally started to outperform in November, which helped SDCERS's public equity asset classes immensely. Another asset class we saw a nice outperformance from was emerging market debt, where local currency debt rallied during the quarter as a result of a weakening dollar. And infrastructure was actually the strongest performer on a relative basis and outperformed its benchmark for the quarter as a result of a rebound in energy prices and gains in tech-focused investments like data centers. The largest detractor during the quarter was the Opportunity Fund, as you can see. As you know, the role of the Opportunity Fund is to provide diversification to the total fund and holds mostly fixed income type investments. And as such, the Opportunity Fund really won't keep up in a strong bull market like we're in right now. So to summarize, I just want to say we saw strong performance from the fund during the fourth quarter, both on a relative and absolute basis, and over the longer term, performance continues to outpace our 6.5% actuarial rate of return target. And before I end, I really just want to say thank you to all the outgoing board members, and it's been a great pleasure working with you over all these years. So big heartfelt thank you to all of you, and we appreciate you. So that's all I have. So if you have any questions, shoot.
Okay, very good risk-adjusted return story too, especially longer term. Any other questions or comments on the report? If not, this is not an action item, just an informational item. We did go into closed session yesterday, but we do not have anything to report out, and that concludes the investment committee summary.
Okay, thanks very much, and thanks for your kind words, Anders. Next, we are nearing the end of our agenda, so we're going to move to questions and comments. Are there questions and comments from board members?
Carol, I just want to make a quick comment, if I can.
Sure, go ahead.
All right. First, I just want to say thank you to staff. I cannot thank you enough for all the work that you guys have done. Liza, you run a tremendous department, and I think you have a tremendous amount to be proud of, and I think the organization wouldn't be where it's at without you. I want to thank Marcel. I have absolutely enjoyed watching your growth over the years. It's been an absolute just pleasure working with you and seeing how you've kind of come into your own in this organization. And I think the organization reflects a lot of you in it. I also wanted to thank Ted, who has been just an absolute blast to deal with, because God knows I at least harass him every single possible time that I can. He takes it well, and he's done a phenomenal job with the organization. And I got to tell you, when you see the awards he wins and the work product he produces, he's fantastic. Of course, I appreciate Greg. I haven't worked with him as long as everybody else, but I appreciate the fact that he's letting everybody kind of shine, kind of direct themselves and whatnot. And I also I want to say thank you to David Bond, who is just kind of what I consider a quiet giant out there, and he just kind of does the work every day and makes sure that everything runs. So thank you. I really couldn't work with a better group of staff. I don't mean to leave anybody out. Staff is fantastic, but those are some people I wanted to say thank you to. I'll also recognize Johnny, because I feel I have to. I'm a lawyer. He's a lawyer, and I feel no one else is going to recognize him if I don't. But I also want to say thank you to all of the board members that I've served with, both past and present. You guys are fantastic. I have learned a tremendous amount. but I would like to just identify 4 people who in particular really were, I would consider mentors to me, and people I have learned a great deal from it. And whether they knew it or not, I want to say thank you very much to Bobby. I have absolutely enjoyed working with you. I love your professionalism. And I have learned a tremendous amount from you. Paul, you as well. I think it's been an absolute pleasure to work with you. But I will say, and it's probably because of my just sheer ignorance, I've learned probably the absolute most from Karina. And Karina, I will tell you, I think the organization is in great hands with you still being there. Your insights and your knowledge are fantastic. And I think whoever recruited you deserves a medal. And then lastly, I think one of the most interesting influencers in my term on the board has got to be Charlie. I enjoy your personality. I enjoy your temperament. I enjoy the fact that you just get it and you do it in a very nice way. And so thank you. I'm a better person for having served here. I'm a better person for serving with all of you guys, and I thank you very much. I know that I'm leaving this board in a good place, in a good position, and I think that you guys, as long as the board continues to understand that our job isn't to make policy, our job isn't to make friends, our job is to make sure that the plan works, that the plan is there, and to be rigorously transparent so that the other parties, the city, the plan sponsor, the unions, can negotiate with accurate information so that they can end up with the right result for their individual interests. And the only way that happens is if we're transparent and if we do the right thing every day at every point in every opportunity. Again, thank you guys very much. Carol, thank you very much.
Wow, thank you, Tanasi. That was really a lovely summary. I think we all share your feelings about, excuse me, the excellence of the staff, the professionalism, how we all feel supported here on the board. The clarity of the governance structure makes our job a lot easier, the quality of the service providers. So yeah, it's a wonderful organization, and you are very well prepared to take on challenges going forward. And thank you to everybody who has given their service and is leaving us now. Any other comments?
I'll just make a quick comment kind of along the same lines. Certainly wanted to recognize all of the efforts of the outgoing board members, and we will certainly miss you. It's going to be like a whole generational change here. I don't want to leave anyone out, but Carol, I certainly want to thank you for all of your leadership and expertise and dedication, and say thank you so much. I've learned a lot from you as well, and certainly we'll miss Tom and Jeff and Mike, as well as Tanasi. You got a special place in my heart. So thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from board members? Okay, at this time, I think that Greg would like to make some additional comments.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Again, I would like to recognize and thank Carol, Tanasi, Tom, Jeff, and Mike for their board service. I promised Tanasi I wouldn't say that his service was better than a poke in the eye with a sharp stick, so I won't. It truly has been a pleasure working with you, and I will really miss having you part of our SDCERS team. Staff will be reaching out to you, asking for your assistance for things such as returning equipment, filing, leaving office Form 700, and also an opportunity to have an exit interview with our Chief Compliance Officer. Looking to the future, we'll be welcoming 2 newly elected general members at our May 2021 meeting, Sarah Mayen, who's an Assistant Director with the City Department of Finance, and Brett Bartolotta, an Assistant City Attorney. Additionally, we'll be welcoming newly elected Fire Safety Member Paul Lotes. The Mayor's Office of the Boards and Commissions noted they have identified an appointment from the Mayor's Office to staff to replace the formerly filled seat by Almas Udris, and we can expect this appointment coming up fairly soon. Additionally, SDCERS staff have forwarded 4 candidates to the Mayor's Office for consideration to fill the vacancies from Carol and Tanasi's departure. The Mayor's Office has also identified an additional candidate for consideration, but there's been no formal action for appointments or reappointing Ms. Spoon or Mr. Kenny. Staff will be providing an online orientation for the new board and audit committee members in advance of our May meetings. With President Broad's departure, Vice President Coleman will take over the presidential duties until the board selects a new president. Current board policy is for the board to appoint a nominating committee at our upcoming May meeting to identify candidates for board president and recommend one candidate for election at the July meeting. While the new president will have responsibility for committee assignments, interim President Coleman will need to make some interim appointments to the committee so we can continue to do business. With that, I have 3 operational items I'd like to briefly mention. First is a remote call center update. Last year, the member services and IT teams worked with the city's call center vendor to implement an SDCERS remote call center. Regrettably, the city and the call center vendor are having a severe disagreement, which has ended up in what I believe is litigation and necessitated SDCERS to find a new remote call center solution. Fortunately, our member services and IT teams sprang into action and implemented a new remote call center with a new vendor in very short order. I would like to recognize and thank Victoria Fedelizo, Jessica Maloney, Cynthia Queen, and David Bond for making this happen successfully on, again, a very, very short notice. So thank you very, very much. It was an amazing project, and I'm very, very pleased with the outcome. Also, we had a disaster preparedness exercise since the last time we met. You may remember that every other year, SDCERS staff tests its disaster preparedness by holding a disaster recovery exercise. This requires staff to process monthly retiree payroll, transmit files to the bank, transfer funds, all without using any of the regular SDCERS systems. Our 2021 test was a win-win success. First win, staff brought up our remote disaster IT system, processed the February payroll without using the SDCERS network, and transmitted payroll files to the bank remotely, and made the appropriate cash transfers. The second win is that we failed. We found unexpected failure points. We overcame them, it remedied them so they don't cause an issue in the future. Also, I'd like to provide a Proposition B update. The Superior Court has issued its written opinion for the city to remove Proposition B from the city charter, and the 60-day appeal clock is ticking. I believe that clock will run out in the first part of April, so I think we will know one way or the other kind of the trajectory of removing Prop B at that time in early April. Fortunately, the city is not waiting until time runs out and has begun addressing how to restore SDCERS benefits to the affected employees. As the city plans to negotiate a solution with its represented employee organizations, they have asked SDCERS to join the city's planning efforts as a subject matter expert. Similarly, SDCERS outreach to offer subject matter expert services to the represented employee organizations has gone very well. Internally, SDCERS expects all staff will be called upon to work on the reopening of the city plan, and we have established a task force internally to coordinate our efforts with Marcel as our project manager. Something interesting that we always have to keep aware of, integrity and transparency are part of our SDCERS core values. So now would be a really great time for me to remind the board that I'm not currently an SDCERS board member, or excuse me, SDCERS member, and this Proposition B project may impact my compensation package in some unknown manner. As such, it's important to identify and manage conflicts of interest that are real and imagined. So fortunately, we have experts to help us with this, and I would like our General Counsel, Johnny Tran, to say a few words on this topic.
Thank you, Greg. Board, your fiduciary counsel recommended that I disclose on the record why Greg and other staff can work on the Proposition B matter despite the outcome of that matter affecting them financially. So as you know, staff as well as the board cannot participate in an SDCERS decision or contract if it affects them financially. However, if the effect of that, of them working on it, affects everyone broadly in similarly situated cases, then there is no conflict, and so Greg and others can work on the project. So Greg and other staff members that are helping out with the subject matter expert for Proposition B, the outcome of that will affect Greg and everyone else equally, so there is no conflict. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you. And I would like to add, as we are working with all of our stakeholder groups, we are subject matter experts and we are not driving the decisions. I think as Tanasi very aptly pointed out earlier in his comments, we're here to provide transparency and help those organizations that are responsible for making the decisions have all the information they need to make informed decisions. And that's the perspective and what we're striving to achieve with all of our stakeholder groups as we move forward. And with that, that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the comments. Okay, with that.
I think Liza Kristofi has.
Oh, sorry. Liza, please.
Just very quickly, I just want to thank all of the departing board members. I've really enjoyed working with all of you. I really appreciate all of your contributions to SDCERS, but I would be remiss if I didn't give a special shout out to Carol for her leadership on the board and also specifically with respect to the investment committee. We really appreciated your input, your steady guidance, your asking good questions, challenging the status quo, and you were really responsible for making a significant change in the real estate portfolio for the better. So I have to really thank you for all of your input. It's been great working with you. It'd be sad not to have you on the meetings anymore, but thank you.
Wow, thanks very much. I really appreciate that. It's been really a pleasure working with you all. You're a really excellent team. And are there any other comments?
If I may, Carol,
yeah,
this is
Steve.
I'm going to pile on. That's a sin in the consulting world to pile on, but I'm going to pile on to the comments that have already been made. It's hard to see so many amazing board members leaving. You're leaving a big hole, but you're also leaving the organization far better than it was when you got here. You've made Katie and I better at our jobs with your governance, your stewardship, and the question.
Oop, you're a little frozen.
Still frozen?
You're back.
Oh, I have no idea what you just heard or didn't hear, but looks like my internet is unstable. I was just merely thanking you all for challenging Katie and myself. You've made us better consultants, and you've made this investment program stronger and better than it was when you first arrived. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. It's been really a pleasure working with you and Katie and everyone in your organization. So thanks so much. Any other comments? Okay, hearing none, that concludes the main part of our meeting. We're now going to go into closed session. And if you are not a part of closed session, please close your Zoom meeting. And when we're done, we'll come back and report out if there's anything to report. So we're going to take about a 3 to 5 minute break while we get this organized. But please leave the meeting if you're not in closed session. Thank you. It's just us chickens.
I'm going to try reaching out to CJ, see if she ever made it into the room.
There she is.
There she
Here.
is. Good.
We're just waiting for the IT folks, and then we'll let you know when we can get back on.
Okay, thank you.
Carol, this is just our way to go into denial and not let you leave. We're going to stay on the Zoom call for another 6 or 7 days.
Oh, God, I'll have to get some lunch. Okay. That's nice.
We're ready? Okay, we're ready.
Okay. I understand we're now back in open session, and I'd like to ask Johnny Tran to give us a report on closed session.
Thank you, Carol. There's nothing to report out of closed session today.
Okay, thanks so much. And with that, if there is no other business, I am going to adjourn the meeting. The meeting is adjourned. Thanks so much.
Okay.
Thank you, Carol.
Carol.
Okay, don't be strangers. Bye now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.